The phone call came on a Tuesday morning while I was rushing to get ready for work. Miss Charlotte Ramirez? The voice was professional, clipped. This is Henderson Storage Solutions in Phoenix. You've inherited Unit 247 from Marcus Ramirez. Your payment is 3 months overdue. I dropped my coffee mug. It shattered across the kitchen tiles, hot liquid spreading like spilled secrets. I'm sorry, what? Marcus Ramirez died 6 years ago. And I don't know anything about a storage unit. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. Ma'am, according to our records, you're listed as the sole beneficiary. The unit has been in his name since 1987. If payment isn't received by Friday, we'll be forced to auction the contents. That was the year my father disappeared. The year my mother Patricia told me and my brother Daniel that Dad had abandoned us for another woman in California. The year our family fell apart. I hung up and immediately called my brother. Danny, did you know Dad had a storage unit in Phoenix? Silence. Then Charlotte, why are you bringing up ancient history? Dad's been dead for years. Because apparently he's been paying for a storage unit since 1987, and now I've inherited it, 3 months behind on payments. Just let it go to auction. Whatever's in there, we don't need it. But I couldn't let it go. That night, I booked a flight to Phoenix. Standing in front of Unit 247 3 days later, I felt like I was about to open Pandora's box. The facility manager, a weathered man named Joe, handed me the bolt cutters with a sympathetic look. Happens more than you'd think. People die. Families don't know about their storage. Usually it's just old furniture and photo albums. The metal door screeched as it rolled up. Dust motes danced in the Arizona sunlight that suddenly flooded the 10 by 10 space, and that's when I saw it. Boxes. Dozens of them, but not random household items. These were organized, labeled, methodical. And on the far wall, a corkboard covered in photographs, newspaper clippings, and what looked like a timeline stretching back decades. I stepped closer and my blood turned to ice water. The photos weren't of our family, they were surveillance photos, of my mother, of Daniel, of me. Some were recent, from last Christmas, from Daniel's wedding 2 years ago, from my college graduation. But others were older, much older. And in the center of it all, a newspaper clipping with a headline that made my knees buckle. Local businessman suspected in embezzlement scandal. Marcus Ramirez vanishes. The date, March 15, 1987. My father hadn't abandoned us. He'd been watching us. For 23 years after we thought he was dead, Marcus Ramirez had been watching his family from the shadows. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands and called Daniel again. This time, my voice was steady as steel. Danny, you need to get to Phoenix, now. Charlotte, what's going on? I stared at a photo of myself from last month, walking into my apartment building. Someone had taken it from across the street. Someone who knew exactly where I lived. Dad's alive, Danny, and I think Mom knows. I spent 3 hours in that storage unit before Daniel arrived, and each discovery was like peeling back layers of an onion made of lies. By the time my brother's rental car pulled up to the facility, I had assembled a timeline that would destroy everything we thought we knew about our family. The first box I opened contained financial records, bank statements, wire transfers, offshore account information. Marcus Ramirez hadn't just disappeared, he'd been systematically moving money for months before his supposed death. But not in the way the newspaper suggested. These weren't records of embezzlement, these were records of whistleblowing. Page after page of documented evidence showing that his business partner, Jonathan Hayes, had been stealing from their construction company's pension fund. Letters from a federal investigator. Meeting notes with the FBI. And finally, a death threat. Typed, anonymous, but with one line that made everything clear. Back off the Hayes investigation, or your family pays the price. The second box contained fake identification documents, driver's licenses, social security cards, birth certificates, all for different names, all with my father's photo. Michael Rodriguez, 1987. David Martinez, 1994. Carlos Gutierrez, 2003. Antonio Vega, 2010. He'd been reinventing himself every few years, always staying close enough to watch us, never close enough to put us in danger. But the third box contained something I wasn't prepared for. Letters, hundreds of them, all addressed to Patricia Ramirez, my mother, all returned, unopened. The date started in 1988 and continued right up to 3 months ago. 23 years of letters, from a dead man to his wife. I opened one at random, dated 1995. Patricia, Charlie started high school this year. I saw her at the science fair. She looks so much like you. I wanted to tell her how proud I am, but I can't risk it. Hayes's people are still watching. The federal case fell apart. Too much corruption, too many people paid off. But I found something else. Something bigger. I can't come home until it's finished, but I want you to know, every day away from you three is killing me. Daniel arrived as I was reading a letter from 2008, the year he graduated college. Patricia, Danny looked so handsome at graduation. I was there, in the back row. I cried when they called his name. I know you think I abandoned you, but I'm protecting you. I always have been. The day I can come home and keep you safe, I will, I promise. Charlotte, what the hell? Daniel's voice trailed off as he took in the organized chaos of the storage unit. I held up the letter. Dad wasn't dead, Danny, and Mom knew it. My brother's face went white. What do you mean she knew? I walked him over to the corkboard and pointed to a section I hadn't shown him on the phone. Beneath the surveillance photos was a collection of newspaper clippings about our family. My high school valedictorian speech. Daniel's promotion at the engineering firm. Mom's real estate awards. But these weren't random clippings someone might save. These were clippings with handwritten notes in the margins. Notes in my mother's handwriting. Charlotte won the state science competition. She gets her brain from you. Daniel bought his first house. The down payment came from the account you left for us. I kept your secret for 23 years. I hope someday you can come home. Daniel staggered backward. She's been communicating with him? Look at this, I said, pulling out a manila folder labeled Safe Deposit Box First National Phoenix. Inside were photographs of legal documents. A will, updated every year. Life insurance policies that never got canceled. And a letter of instruction that made my heart stop. In the event of my actual death, Patricia Ramirez has power of attorney over all assets. The safety deposit box at First National contains evidence that will clear my name and ensure Jonathan Hayes faces justice for what he's done. My family deserves the truth. I looked at my brother. Danny, Dad didn't just fake his death. He's been building a case against Hayes for 23 years. And 3 months ago, he stopped updating the storage unit. The implication hung between us like a loaded gun. You think he's actually dead this time? Daniel whispered. I pulled out the last item from the folder, a Phoenix morgue receipt, dated 4 months ago. John Doe, elderly Hispanic male, heart attack, no identification, no next of kin claimed. But paperclipped to the receipt was a photograph. Our father, taken at the morgue, and a handwritten note. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from the truth. The storage unit has everything you need. Tell Patricia I never stopped loving her. Tell my children I never stopped being their father. Mr. He's really gone this time, I said quietly. But he left us a roadmap to finish what he started. Daniel picked up one of the returned letters, this one from just 6 months ago. If Mom knew he was alive, if she's been covering for him all these years, why didn't she tell us? I stared at the wall of evidence, 23 years of a man's life lived in shadows, and I finally understood. Because she was protecting us from the same thing that killed him. The drive back to my hotel that night felt like traveling through a time warp. Every memory I had of my childhood was now suspect. Every conversation with my mother potentially layered with deception. But as Daniel and I sat in my hotel room, surrounded by boxes of evidence we'd smuggled out of the storage unit, a different pattern began to emerge. It wasn't just deception, it was protection. Remember when Hayes used to come to our house for dinner? I asked Daniel, sorting through photographs. After Dad disappeared? Daniel nodded grimly. Mom always seemed nervous when he was around. I thought she was just uncomfortable about Dad's business partner being there. Look at this. I held up a surveillance photo dated 1989. It showed Jonathan Hayes' car parked outside our house. But written on the back in my father's handwriting, Hayes visiting Patricia again. Third time this month. Checking up on them. The pieces were falling into place. Hayes hadn't just been stealing from the pension fund. He'd been monitoring our family, making sure we didn't know anything that could implicate him. And my mother had been playing a dangerous game, pretending to be the abandoned wife while secretly staying in contact with her husband. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. Here's another one, Daniel said, holding up a bank statement from 1992. Look at this deposit pattern. Every month, exactly $2,000 deposited into Mom's account. But it's not from Dad's official bank. I pulled out more financial records. The pattern was consistent for over 2 decades. Marcus Ramirez had been supporting his family through a series of shell companies and anonymous transfers, all while maintaining the fiction that he was dead. But the most damning evidence was in a box labeled, quote, Hayes Investigation, Personal. Inside were transcripts, recorded phone conversations between Hayes and unknown associates. The recordings were dated throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, and they painted a picture of systematic intimidation. If the wife or kids start asking questions, we make them disappear too. Hayes' voice crackled through the old cassette player I'd found in the unit. What about Ramirez? You sure he's not coming back? Marcus is smart enough to stay dead. He knows what happens if he surfaces. But we keep watching the family just in case. I felt sick. Danny, we weren't just mourning Dad. We were living under surveillance for 23 years. But there was more. A folder labeled Patricia Safety Protocols contained detailed instructions my father had left for my mother. How to detect if they were being watched. What to do if someone approached us with questions about Dad. Even how to communicate with him through coded messages in newspaper wedding announcements. Look at this, Daniel said, pointing to a newspaper clipping from 2007. It was a wedding announcement for a couple named Marcus and Patricia Rodriguez, obviously fake names. But the location was specific. We'll honeymoon in Sedona, Arizona. Attached to the clipping was a photograph of my mother standing alone at a scenic overlook in Sedona, and another photo of a man watching her from a distance. My father. They were meeting, I whispered, all those weekend trips Mom took to visit her sister in Scottsdale. She was meeting Dad, Daniel finished. The pattern was clear now. My mother hadn't been betrayed and abandoned. She'd been an active participant in an elaborate witness protection scheme, keeping her children safe while helping her husband build a case against a dangerous man. But there was something else. A series of incident reports, all in my father's handwriting, documenting times when Hayes' surveillance had gotten too close. 1994, Charlie almost approached Hayes' associate at school playground. Patricia moved her to different school next week. 1999, Daniel's college application files were accessed. Scholarship money appeared suspiciously. Hayes making sure we're grateful for his quote, 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 quote. 2003, strange car following Patricia to grocery store. She confirmed via coded message that she noticed. Increased vigilance. 2010, Hayes attended Daniel's wedding as an uninvited guest. Spoke to Patricia. She handled it perfectly but was shaken. This has to end soon. My blood ran cold. Hayes was at your wedding? Daniel frowned. That older guy who said he knew Dad from the construction business? Patricia told me he was just paying respects. That was Hayes. And Mom knew exactly who he was. The final piece of the puzzle was in a letter dated just 8 months ago, addressed to both Daniel and me, but never sent. My dear children, if you're reading this, it means I'm truly gone, and Patricia finally decided you needed to know the truth. I know you both hate me for leaving. I know you think I chose cowardice over family, but every day for the past 23 years, I chose your safety over my own happiness. Jonathan Hayes destroyed our family the day he decided to steal from hardworking people's pensions. But he didn't get to destroy your futures. Every scholarship Danny received, every opportunity Charlotte got, every safe day you both lived, That was your mother and me fighting for you in the shadows. The evidence in this storage unit will put Hayes away forever. But more importantly, it will free Patricia from the burden of secrets she's carried to protect you. She deserves to stop living in fear. You both deserve to know that your father never stopped being proud of you. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for your birthdays, your graduations, your heartbreaks. But I was there, watching, loving you from a distance, making sure you had the chance to become the incredible people you are. Don't blame your mother. She's the strongest person I've ever known, and she saved all of us. Sitting in that hotel room, surrounded by the detritus of my father's shadow life, I realized we hadn't been abandoned at all. We'd been protected by the most elaborate, heartbreaking act of love I'd ever encountered. The next morning, I called my mother. "Charlotte, honey, how was your trip to Phoenix? You said it was for work." I'd lied to her about why I was traveling. Now, sitting in the hotel room with 23 years of evidence spread across the bed, I decided it was time to stop the cycle of deception. "Mom, I'm sitting in front of a photograph of you from last Christmas. It was taken with a telephoto lens from across the street. Someone was watching our family dinner." Silence. Complete, absolute silence. "Mom?" "Charlotte." Her voice was barely a whisper. "Where did you get that photograph?" "From Dad's storage unit, the one you've been paying for since he died 4 months ago." The silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then I heard something I hadn't heard since I was a child, my mother crying. "How did you find it?" she asked through tears. "They called me about overdue payments. Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I promised him I wouldn't, unless something happened to him. And because I wasn't sure you'd forgive me for lying to you for 23 years. Are you safe right now?" "Yes. Hayes died 2 years ago. Heart attack in his sleep." "Your father?" Marcus waited to make sure Hayes' associates had moved on before he tried to come home. But then his heart... Daniel grabbed the phone from me. "Mom, we need to see you. All of this evidence, everything Dad collected. What are we supposed to do with it?" "Bring it home, Danny, all of it. It's time to finish what your father started." 12 hours later, we were sitting in our childhood living room. The same floral wallpaper, the same family photos, but everything felt different. My mother looked older, frailer, like she'd been carrying a weight that had finally been acknowledged. She pulled out a safety deposit box key I'd never seen before. "Your father updated this every year," she said quietly. "The latest evidence is all here. Financial records showing Hayes stole over $12 million from worker pensions. Names of federal investigators who were bribed to drop the case. Even recordings of Hayes admitting to having your father killed, though he died of natural causes before his people could get to him." "Mom," I said gently, "why now? Why not years ago?" She walked to our old family photo on the mantel, the last one taken before Dad disappeared, because Hayes had connections everywhere. Police, FBI, judges. Your father tried to come forward in 1987, and they nearly killed him for it. The only way to keep you safe was to let the world think he was dead, while he gathered evidence they couldn't ignore or suppress. "But Hayes is dead now," Daniel pointed out. "Hayes is dead, but the pension fund was never recovered. Thousands of people lost their retirement because of him, and there are still people in the system who covered for him." She turned to face us. "Your father's evidence could get them prosecuted and return millions to the families Hayes robbed." She handed us each a thick manila folder. "These are the names of every person Hayes bribed, every official who looked the other way, every account where the money was hidden. Your father spent 23 years building this case. He died believing you two would finish it." I opened my folder. Inside was a detailed plan, written in my father's careful handwriting. Contact information for honest federal investigators, lawyers who specialized in pension fraud, and journalists who'd been trying to crack the Hayes story for decades. But there was something else. A letter addressed to my children, the truth tellers. "I know asking you to finish this fight isn't fair. You didn't choose this battle, and you've already sacrificed too much for my decisions. But you're the only ones Hayes' corruption can't touch. You're clean. You're credible. And you're strong enough to see justice done. The pension fund money is still out there, hidden in offshore accounts Hayes' widow doesn't even know about. 37 families never got their retirement money back. Some of those people are still alive, still struggling. You have the power to give them the justice I never could. But more than that, you have the power to clear my name. To show the world that Marcus Ramirez wasn't a criminal who abandoned his family. He was a whistleblower who sacrificed everything to protect the people he loved and expose the truth. The choice is yours. You can bury this evidence with me, or you can use it to help people who have been waiting 23 years for justice. Either way, know that I'm proud of you, both of you, always. I looked at Daniel, then at our mother. What do we do? Mom pulled out a business card that was worn from handling. This is Agent Sarah Mitchell, FBI Financial Crimes. She was a rookie when your father first tried to come forward. She's been waiting 23 years for this evidence. Daniel took the card. And you think she can be trusted? Your father trusted her. She's the one who helped him disappear when Hayes's people came after him. She's been protecting our family from the shadows almost as long as Marcus was. I felt something shift inside me, like tumblers falling into place in a complicated lock. We weren't just inheriting evidence. We were inheriting a mission. There's something else, Mom said quietly. She walked to the kitchen and came back with a newspaper clipping from last week. The headline read, "Former construction executive's widow donates millions to local charity." The photo showed an elegant older woman handing over a check. The woman was identified as Helen Hayes, Jonathan's widow. She has no idea the money she's donating came from stolen pensions, but the paper trail your father built could prove it. We could get those millions redirected to the families Hayes robbed. I looked at the evidence spread across our childhood coffee table. 23 years of sacrifice, surveillance, and secrets. When do we call Agent Mitchell? I asked. Agent Sarah Mitchell arrived at our house 3 days later with a full FBI forensic team. Watching federal agents carefully catalog my father's life work in our living room felt surreal, like watching archaeologists uncover an ancient civilization. Mitchell was a woman in her 50s with steel gray hair and eyes that had seen too much corruption. She handled each piece of evidence with the reverence of someone who understood its true value. Your father was the most thorough investigator I've ever worked with, she told us as she examined the recorded conversations. These tapes alone are enough to reopen a dozen federal cases. But the real breakthrough came when she saw the financial records. My God, she whispered, spreading the offshore account statements across our dining room table. He traced every dollar. We could recover the entire pension fund with this information. The next 6 months moved like a controlled avalanche. The FBI arrested 4 former federal agents who had been bribed to drop the original Hayes investigation. 2 judges were forced to resign. A dozen offshore accounts were frozen, containing over $14 million in stolen pension money. Helen Hayes was devastated when she learned the truth about her late husband's charity donations. Rather than fight the investigation, she became our strongest ally, helping to locate additional hidden assets and publicly apologizing to the families Hayes had robbed. The media attention was overwhelming. Ghost Investigator Solves 23-year-old Pension Fraud dominated headlines for weeks. My father's story became a symbol of sacrifice and perseverance, a man who gave up his life to serve justice. But the personal cost was harder to measure. Daniel struggled with anger. 23 years of believing our father was a coward who abandoned us, only to discover he was a hero who sacrificed everything to protect us. He started therapy to process the complicated grief of mourning a man who was already dead but understanding him for the first time. I found myself oddly at peace. The storage unit had answered every question I'd carried about my father since childhood. Why he left, why he never came back, why our family felt incomplete, it all made sense now. The hardest part was watching my mother emerge from decades of secrecy. I forgot who I was before all this, she told me one evening as we went through old family photos. I've been Patricia Ramirez, keeper of secrets, for so long that I don't remember how to just be Patricia. She started seeing a therapist too. 23 years of living with the weight of her husband's secrets, of raising children who hated their father, of maintaining the fiction that she was a widow when she was really a woman in hiding. It had taken a profound psychological toll. But there were moments of healing too. The first pension check restoration ceremony was held at the Phoenix Community Center. 37 families received settlements averaging $400,000 each. Daniel and I were invited to speak on our father's behalf. Standing at that podium, looking out at elderly faces that lit up with tears of relief and gratitude, I finally understood the weight my father had carried. These weren't just numbers on financial statements, they were people. Real families who had worked their entire lives, saved for retirement, and been robbed by a man in a suit who thought he was untouchable. My father couldn't be here today, I told the crowd, my voice steady despite the emotion. But he spent 23 years making sure this day would happen. Every dollar you receive today, he traced. Every corrupt official who was prosecuted, he exposed. Every year he stayed away from his family was a year he spent fighting for yours. After the ceremony, an elderly man named Robert Chen approached us. He'd been a construction worker on one of Hayes's projects and lost his entire retirement when the pension fund was emptied. "I never thought I'd see this money again," he said, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I've been working as a Walmart greeter at 78 years old just to pay for my medication. Your father, he gave me my dignity back." In that moment, surrounded by people whose lives had been restored by my father's sacrifice, I felt something I hadn't experienced since childhood. Uncomplicated pride in who Marcus Ramirez was. The investigation officially closed 8 months after we opened that storage unit. Hayes' criminal network was dismantled, the stolen money was returned, and my father's name was cleared in every newspaper that had once called him a fugitive. But the real resolution came on a quiet Tuesday evening when Agent Mitchell brought us the final piece of evidence. A letter my father had written to federal prosecutors but never sent. "I know my children will never understand why I left them. I know my wife will carry the burden of my choices for the rest of her life. But someone has to fight for people who can't fight for themselves. Someone has to prove that justice isn't for sale, even when it feels like everything else is. If my sacrifice means that working families get their retirement back, if it means corrupt officials face consequences, if it means the next whistleblower doesn't have to choose between truth and family, then it was worth it. I just wish I could have been a father and a fighter at the same time." Reading those words in our living room, with federal agents packing up the last of the evidence, I realized my father had been both. He'd been a father who taught us, through his absence, that some fights are worth everything. And he'd been a fighter who proved that the truth, no matter how buried, eventually finds its way to the surface. 2 years later, I'm sitting in what used to be my childhood bedroom, now converted into a home office where I run a victim advocacy nonprofit. The Marcus Ramirez Foundation helps families navigate financial fraud investigations and provides support for whistleblowers who face retaliation. The storage unit has been cleared out, but I kept one thing: the corkboard covered in surveillance photos of our family. It hangs in my office now, not as a reminder of invasion, but as a testament to love that survives impossible circumstances. Daniel moved back to our hometown and works as a forensic accountant for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. He jokes that following money trails is in his DNA, but there's truth in it. Our father's meticulous investigation methods taught us both the power of patient, detailed truth-seeking. Mom is learning to live without secrets. She's dating someone, a retired teacher named William, who knows our whole story and isn't intimidated by it. Last month, she laughed so hard at one of his jokes that she snorted wine through her nose. I hadn't heard her laugh like that since before Dad disappeared. The ripple effects of that storage unit discovery continue to spread. 3 other pension fraud cases have been solved using Dad's investigative methods. Agent Mitchell now teaches courses at Quantico on long-term financial crime investigation, using Marcus Ramirez as a case study in persistence and sacrifice. But the most profound change has been in how I understand family. For 23 years, I thought we were broken. I thought our father was a selfish man who chose escape over responsibility. I thought our mother was a victim who never recovered from abandonment. I thought Daniel and I were collateral damage from someone else's poor choices. The truth was more complicated and infinitely more beautiful. We were never broken. We were protected by a love so fierce it was willing to become invisible. Our father didn't abandon us. He became a guardian angel who watched from the shadows. Our mother didn't crumble under abandonment. She became a warrior who fought battles we didn't even know were being fought. And Daniel and I weren't damaged by our father's absence. We were shaped by his sacrifice into people strong enough to finish what he started. The storage unit taught me that families aren't just the people who live in your house. They're the people who fight for your future, even when you can't see the battle. They're the people who carry impossible burdens so you don't have to. They're the people who sacrifice their own happiness for your safety and call it love. Sometimes the greatest acts of love are the ones that can never be acknowledged. Sometimes protecting someone means letting them think you've abandoned them. Sometimes being a hero means accepting that history will remember you as a villain. My father was never really gone. He was just love in disguise, justice wearing the mask of absence, sacrifice dressed up as selfishness. Now, when people ask me about forgiveness and family, I tell them about a storage unit in Phoenix that held 23 years of surveillance photos. Not the creepy kind that comes from obsession, but the protective kind that comes from a parent's heart breaking a little more each day from distance, but never breaking completely. I tell them that sometimes the people who love you most are the ones who have to love you from the furthest away. And sometimes the inheritance that matters most isn't money or property. It's the truth about who was really fighting for you all along. The storage unit is empty now, but our family is finally truly whole. Because love doesn't end when someone dies, it transforms. And if you're very lucky, it leaves behind a roadmap that leads you exactly where you need to go. In our case, it led us home to each other, and forward into a future built on truth instead of secrets. That inheritance was worth more than any amount of money. It was worth 23 years of questions, finally answered. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.